If you played the Bazaar at all since June 4th, chances are you've had your perfect run completely decimated by Dinosaur Dooley. Today, I'll teach you all there is to know about Dinosaur Dooley. So, welcome to the Bazaar Academy. As Season 3 comes to a close, I'll be walking through how to navigate each stage of your run as you pursue Dinosaur Dooley. I'll also point out the strengths and weaknesses of Season 3's mightiest build. But first, let's talk about the lesson plan. First, we'll walk through what each stage of your run might look like as you pursue Dinosaur Dooley. We'll identify the key cards you want to find in the early game that set you up for a potential dinosaur build in the future. Then we'll discuss how to solidify your build in the mid game, refine it in the late game, and optimize it in the end game. Afterwards, we'll look at a few potential builds and end with some key considerations based on your PvP matchups. An important chart you should keep in mind are the item rarity spawn rates for each day. On day 1, you can only find bronze items. On day 2, you have a 9% chance to find silver items, and so on. Most notably, on day 5, you can begin finding gold tier items. These will be important stats to keep in mind as we decide which cards to buy at each stage in the game. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the early game strategy. In the current meta, Dooley should only consider 2 starting options, either the income start or enchanted item. Since dinos are by far the most consistent Dooley build in Season 3, you want to choose income to ensure that you have enough money to buy any dinosaurs that appear in the shops. If you do choose the enchanted item start, you're really only looking for the dinosaur. So on day 1, you can only find bronze items. The key cards you'll be looking for are going to be Tanky Yankee and the Dinosaur, both of which could remain on your board for the entire run. However, if you don't find these cards immediately, there are some other cards you should still consider that will allow you to pull off a dinosaur build later on. First is the Uzi. In the early game, this card should be considered an auto buy, as it works well with almost every core. In some situations, you may even end up keeping the Uzi on your board for the entirety of the run, as its low cooldown enables a lot of synergies later on. Similarly, the rocket launcher should also be considered an auto buy. While it may not remain on your board permanently like the Uzi, it can easily carry you through the early game and well into the mid game if paired well with your core. Next up is Satcom. While this is a good econ card itself, its bronze version is especially useful when you're trying to force a dinosaur build, as you have a 1 in 9 chance to get a dinosaur. However, if you upgrade the Satcom to silver, that chance drops to a 1 in 14. So there are times when you should consider not upgrading your Satcom to silver. And lastly, we have Forklift and Railgun. So why are we considering these cards for a dinosaur build? Well, in Season 3, there are only 3 large Dooley cards that have bronze variants: Tanky Yankee, Forklift, and Railgun. So if you transform a Railgun or a Forklift at the transformation location, you have a 50% chance to generate a Tanky Yankee. So starting on day 2, where would we find silver cards if we're lucky? So this adds a few more considerations to our list. First up is Trollosaur, a dinosaur that destroys a small item the first time either player falls below half health, and it scales its own attack and burn accordingly. If you're able to find this card on day 2, chances are you're going to keep it on your board for the rest of the run. Dinosaur is also one of the staples of any dinosaur build. It destroys a small item the first time it attacks, increasing the attack of all your dinosaurs on your board by 10 damage permanently. At the end of day 2, you have the option of choosing one of Dooley's cores. Obviously, the best core for dino builds is going to be the Primal core, as it pairs well with very low cooldown items like the Uzi, and also multi-attack items like the rocket launcher, temporarily scaling the attack of all relics and dinosaurs. Adjacent items are also converted into relics, meaning they receive the attack scaling buff, and can also be used to reduce the cooldown on your Dinosaur. The combo of Dinosaur and Primal Core can carry you all the way to 10 wins if you continuously scale their attack with dinosaurs like the Dinosaur. If the Primal Core does not appear, Weaponized Core can be used instead, but you shouldn't aim to keep this card around long term, as it begins to fall off towards the mid game. As for the early game encounters, you want to fight against either the Fanged Inlet or the Viper if possible on day 1, to potentially get a Fang, which serves a very similar function as the Uzi without having the drawback of ammo. You also want to go to Tiny Furry Monster, assuming you have a friend, and choose a skill. The best skills in the early game are going to be attack-based skills and shield-based skills. If you're able to apply additional shield on your tanky Anki, it'll add that amount of shield anytime you attack with a dinosaur. So with the early game complete, let's move into the mid-game strategy. The mid-game includes days 3 through 6. On days 3 and 4, you'll mainly want to focus on finding the key silver tier cards. As mentioned in the early game section, you want to find Trollosaur and Dinosaur as soon as possible. You also want to find Rex Specs. While it's technically possible to find this card on day 2, large items are already pretty rare to find in the early game, and since it doesn't have a bronze variant, it's likely you won't see this card until the mid-game. That being said, if you happen to upgrade your bronze railgun or forklift, you could try to transform one of those cards into a silver Rex Specs, but the odds are only going to be 1 in 11. Regardless, with the recent changes in Season 3, Rex Specs has become a meta-defining card due to his ability to destroy any card regardless of its size, as long as your board is smaller than your opponent's board. Likewise, to get the most out of Rex Specs, you want to limit your board size as much as possible. Some other noteworthy cards for days 3 and 4 are going to be DJ Circuit Breaker and Dino Disguise. DJ Circuit Breaker can pair well with Dino Solar and allow you to get the larger dinosaurs online more quickly and more consistently. Meanwhile, Dino Disguise works well with the Primal Core. Since it gains multicast for each dinosaur or relic on your board, it's able to provide some defense while also charging the Primal Core significantly. So this works well if you have a lot of smaller items and isn't as effective if you already found some of the medium and large sized dinosaurs. On days 5 and 6, you'll be able to find golden tier cards. So at this stage, you want to focus on finding the gold tier dinos or upgrading your silver tier ones to gold. With that in mind, you'll now be able to find the Mamasaur, who destroys a small or medium sized item the first time it attacks. And like Dinosaur, it also scales the attack of all your dinosaurs on your board permanently whenever you destroy an item. When paired with Rex Specs, this allows you to destroy many items in a single combat, increasing the attack on all your dinosaurs significantly. You'll also be able to find a Hacksaw. While this card isn't a dinosaur itself, it has a relatively small cooldown and destroys a small or medium-sized item the first time it attacks. This can be a useful flex item when going up against NPCs because you can temporarily swap out an item on your board to get an additional destroy effect off, scaling the attack of your dinos even more, assuming you've already found a Dinosaur or Mamasaur. Hacksaw could also be a permanent part of a Rex Specs build since it doubles its own damage for the combat whenever you destroy an item. Likewise, increasing the attack of a Hacksaw outside of combat through the Curio, for instance, or through skills, can allow this weapon to scale its attack very quickly in a heavy destroy build. You also want to focus on reducing the cooldown of your dinosaurs whenever you can. One of the biggest weaknesses of this archetype is that it takes a while before any of your cards get online, with the exception of the Dinosaur. So faster builds may be able to rush you down before you're able to destroy any of their items. So it's important to get cooldown reduction or haste effects through items or skills in order to overcome this inherent weakness. As for the mid-game encounters, you want to fight monsters that drop the Day 9 Expedition ticket. Or if you have some spare change, you can also go to the Aerodrome and buy one for 20 gold. This Day 9 event contains 2 NPC fights, allowing you to scale your dinosaurs more than a regular day. And the relic rewards at the end of this event may also give you the opportunity to upgrade one of your dinosaurs with a damage-based enchantment. You also want to focus on visiting these 3 shops, as these are your best chances of finding and upgrading many of the key dinosaurs. There are also plenty of powerful skills that are only active when you have 5 items or less. With dinosaur builds, you'll be able to meet this condition pretty naturally, so you should strongly consider picking up these skills whenever you see them. Hopefully by the end of this mid-game, your dino build is starting to come together. If not, you should strongly consider pivoting to a different strategy, perhaps one that you're able to find golden cards for, or one that aligns well with the skills you've collected so far. Now, let's talk about the late game. The late game. On day 7 and 9, your primary goal should be to continue scaling the attack of your existing dinosaurs by destroying as many items as possible, especially during those NPC fights. So if you find any destruction-based items in the shop, you should buy those because chances are you'll be able to use them during the NPC fights without risking a loss, allowing you to further scale the attack on your dinosaurs. Then when it comes to the PvP fights, you can swap in your stronger dinosaur cards. Starting at day 8, you'll also be able to find some diamond tier cards. So if you're lucky enough to find a robotic factory, you should strongly consider making it part of your build. It works extremely well with Rex specs, allowing you to destroy 2 items the first time it attacks. And it can also allow you to one-shot opponents if your Dinosaur has enough attack. Once again, you also want to focus on reducing the cooldown of your dinosaurs, but you can also afford to purchase some more passive effects, like chocolate bars, gumballs, and curio, since you'll likely have some spare change, and you may not be visiting shops as much if the build is already set in stone. Now for the encounters, as mentioned before, the beginning of day 9 is that expedition event, so you really want to maximize your chances of getting that ticket by battling the appropriate monsters or paying 20 gold at the aerodrome. You also want to focus on visiting any shops or locations that allow you to upgrade your items. And now that your build is more set in stone, you can start investing in skills more intentionally for potential power spikes. If you made it this far in your run without getting martyrdom, that is losing all your prestige, your prospects are looking pretty good going into the endgame. The endgame. Much like the late game, in the endgame, your main goals are to keep scaling the attack of your dinosaurs and upgrading them to the diamond tier. Cooldown reductions are still very important, especially in the mirror match, when the deciding factor is often whoever swings first. You should also still consider buying passive buffs like chocolate bars or gumballs, since many vendors will be near obsolete at this point. So in general, you want to focus on encounters that either upgrade your existing items, acquire new skills, or grant additional XP bonuses. If you've been battling against the tougher monsters, or getting small amounts of XP here and there throughout your run, chances are you only need a bit more XP to push you to the next level for your PvP fights. So now let's talk about some potential endgame builds. Potential builds. One of the simplest builds you can make is a defensive Rex Specs build. During the NPC fights, you usually swap out the Tanky Anki for an item that can scale your dinosaur's attack. Then during the PvP fights, you'll substitute back in the Tanky Anki for a bit more defense. However, if you want to forsake defense and go all in on destroying items, you can replace the Tanky Anki with a Momosaur. Either way, it's best to limit these Rex Specs builds to 4 cards or less so that you can ensure its destroy effect goes off. If the attack on your Trollsaur or Dinosaur is relatively low, or if you have reason to suspect that your opponent won't have any small items, you can consider replacing one of these medium-sized cards with a Hacksaw, which can destroy your opponent's medium-sized items. However, if you've already sufficiently scaled your Dinosaur at this point, it may be best to replace the Rex Specs with a Dinosaur in a medium-sized item and consider a different kind of build. For example, this defensive Dinosaur build dishes out damage much faster than the Rex Specs variants, since Dinosaur will have a 3-second cooldown. However, this build heavily relies on Dinosaur having a lot of attack and preferably a damage-based enchantment. Once again, there's a defensive variant that runs Tanky Anki and a more offensive, destruction-based variant that runs Momosaur. Many of the medium-sized items can be swapped out depending on the situation. Hacksaw can target medium-sized items, the core can ensure the Dinosaur's cooldowns being halved, while also putting in some pretty substantial damage itself. DJ Circuit Breaker can allow your dinosaurs to attack more frequently, which can be especially useful if their attack is a bit on the weaker side. Trollsaur can also function as a heavy hitter of this build due to its burn effect, which works especially well if enchanted with Obsidian. You could also replace the larger items in any of these builds with a Robotic Factory, as an easy way to double your damage output. For the final part of this lesson, we'll talk about the PvP matchups. Let's break the matchups down into the early to mid game and the late game. The early game is fairly straightforward, regardless of who your matchup is, as Dooley. Dooley should be focused on synergizing with their core, especially in the earlier stages of the run. Most of the cores allow you to scale your attack, so you should try to position your board as to maximize your damage per second. This can be a delicate balance to strike, and something that you continuously improve upon as you master this hero. When going up against Vanessa in the early game, tanking Yankee can be your key to victory, although you may run into a bit of trouble if they have strong scaling on their catfish, in which case, there's not really much you could have done. As for the Dooley mirror match, there's not really much else to say here, to try to maximize your core usage. As for Pygmalion, even in the early game, they can be quite defensive, so you really need to make sure that your damage doesn't fizzle out halfway through the match. So consider using alternatives to any ammo-based items like the Uzi if you have the option. As for Mac, Tank Yankee can be a bit of a gamble. If you're running into a lot of poison-based Macs, feel free to swap it out if you have a decent alternative. That being said, if you're up against a burn Mac, Tank Yankee can be a free win as well. So when in doubt, you should keep the Tank Yankee on your board. Moving on to the late game, most Vanessa builds in Season 3 get their firepower from one item. They've got Crow's Nest builds, Powder Keg, Depth Charge, Sea Dog Saloon, etc. Likewise, your goal should be to destroy as many items as possible, as quickly as possible. Alternatively, if you're running a dinosaur build, you'd opt out just killing them before they kill you. Once again, for the Dooley mirror match, there's not really much to say, but oftentimes, the first to move has an advantage. And like the Vanessa matchup, a strong dinosaur can finish them off before they kill you. If you're not going a dinosaur build, being the first to destroy an item can also give you a strong advantage. So you may want to consider swapping in a Rex Specs or a Hacksaw into this matchup, since they both act relatively quickly and are capable of destroying the enemy's medium-sized dinosaurs. If you're unfortunate enough to go up against a pig in the late game, then you'll really need to focus on item destruction. Many of their builds don't have many items and rely on OTK combos. So if you destroy any of those key pieces, you may be able to win this matchup. And lastly, we have Mac. Most Mac builds like Magnus Femur, Relics, and Poppyfield take a few seconds before they really get online. So you really need to burst them down before their key items can go off. And that concludes today's lesson. So you're now fully prepared to conquer the meta as a dinosaur Dooley. This is my first YouTube video, so if you have any feedback, I'd like to hear those in the comments. As the kids say these days, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you again in future lectures. Class dismissed.